So I think that in order to meet this need for validation, it all starts with validating ourselves first. And only then we can appreciate the feedback that we receive from other people. So it's a little bit like building a strong foundation within yourself first. So once you learn how to validate yourself in a healthy way, right? What you receive in the external world is a little bit like a little extra, a little bonus that you're getting from other people, from the environment. And also this feedback can then help you grow, because validation is not only the positive feedback. Validation is not only about, other people making you feel important, or other people providing you with, compliments or simply attention. But I think an important part of validation is also receiving this negative feedback. So negative validation in a way that is not rejecting of yourself. So it's not invalidation where, somebody completely misunderstands you or rejects you or rejects different parts of your personality. But negative feedback in the form of, for example, criticism or failures. Failures are super important in terms of learning about ourselves and learning how to grow and, move forward in life in a sense, or achieving different things. So having this realistic idea about, what validation is, I think it's for some people it might be like a disillusionment, because you expect that, other people will always like you, or you want other people to always like you or give you this approval. But the reality is that even the negative feedback can be validating, because then you can learn from it. You need to do 50% of validation yourself, at least 50%. So you need to be able to, for yourself, develop an accurate self-perception, an accurate kind of standards or metrics for maybe evaluating your actions or evaluating your behaviors. So you need to choose your own values and your own perspective on what is right and what is wrong. So it kind of ties in a sense to this idea of having your own inner compass, moral compass, that determines what is right or what is wrong, or how to evaluate your actions, right? Because if you don't have this 50%, if you don't have this self-validation, and you are solely dependent on other people, that's just not a very reliable way. Why? Because every single person has their own values, has their own moral compass, has their own idea of what is right and what is wrong. So, for example, if you ask 10 different people about whether some part of your personality is right or wrong, you're going to get 10 different ideas, 10 different perspectives. That's why this dependence on the environment for validation is just not very accurate. It's never going to be 100% accurate feedback. So you need to be able to determine that the standards and these metrics for yourself, right? So you need to be able to validate your behavior first before you can even consider validation of other people, the feedback of other people. And yes, in many situations, it's going to be accurate, but in many situations, it's not going to be accurate. It becomes kind of clear how unreliable the validation from other people actually is, because everyone is so different. And of course, you will be getting valuable feedback from others, right? You will be getting some criticisms that will help you to improve and learn more, right? You will get some compliments, approval in a sense, which, might help you to feel more powerful maybe, right? More affirmed that you are on the right path. But at the same time, you gotta question this feedback, right? You gotta run it through your own standards, right? Run it through simple logic of, paying attention to facts and what is happening and what that person actually meant, where they're coming from, right? And only then you have a choice to accept it or to reject it. So you don't always have to, take other people's opinions at face value that, it's totally true, it's more important than my opinion or my perspective. But you have to, there is some value in this, in their opinions, but it might be in, total BS at the same time. So that's something to consider as well, that whatever other people are telling us, it's not always, it doesn't have to be true. It doesn't have to be more powerful than our own perspective. It seems like we all are, in a way, a little bit isolated from each other, because we all have this subjective point of view, subjective perspective, and we can choose our values, we can choose how to interpret what, we can choose our opinions and what we think about. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that our opinions and our perspective is the most important one or completely right either. So we need to be able to develop this criteria for ourselves. We need to be able to develop standards for ourselves. So how are we going to get that self-validation? How are we going to know that whatever we are doing is right? Okay, we could have different opinions about ourselves. And a particular example that comes to my mind is this inner critic that we might be having, right? So the critical voice that constantly evaluates our performance or punishes us for not meeting some ideal, right? I think it's very common, a common internal dialogue that we might be having, and which might prevent us from validating ourselves, because then you might get stuck in a loop in a way where you do the right thing, whatever that right thing is, something that is directed towards your growth or well-being, but then the inner critic comes in and tells you that it's pointless, or that you are stupid, or that you can't really do anything, whatever that might be. So getting rid of that criticism could be super helpful, because if you're constantly punishing yourself, or if you have this constantly evaluating voice in the background, whether you're doing something right, whether you're doing something wrong, it's going to prevent you from accessing this level of validation. But then you might be asking, so how do I know whether I'm doing something right or wrong? You choose the standards, right? You choose it. You have to, it's not about, when you deviate from some standards, or when you deviate from some idea you might be having about yourself, it's not about punishing yourself. It's not about criticizing yourself, right? And calling yourself names and making it very personal, that like it's all about you. But it's more about learning from that experience. So what happened, right? What could you do differently next time? What sort of things prevented you from doing the right thing, right? So you orient yourself towards growth, towards learning, right? And not taking things so personally. Like the inner critic it goes very personal. But in fact, when you make a mistake, when you do something wrong, it's very context dependent. So again, goes back to this self-validation and, validating your potential for learning, for moving forward. In order to get that self-validation, or validation in general, we need to build that self-validation. So being able to accept ourselves. And I think this inner criticism, or rejecting ourselves, or, trying to be someone else to get validation or positive feedback from the environment, it could be super damaging to meeting this need for validation, because then we are not connecting with ourselves, right? And if we are not connecting with ourselves, we cannot validate ourselves. We cannot accept different parts of ourselves, right? That's a first step, and that's the first obstacle to not getting that need for validation met. And then if you don't have this foundation of self-validation, again, it creates the dependence on other people. But furthermore, if you're not fully connected with yourself, if you're not validating yourself, and if you're not honest with yourself as much as you can, and it doesn't have to be 100% because we are just humans, but if you're not fully honest, you cannot be authentic with other people. And if you cannot be authentic with other people because you are rejecting different parts of you, right? Because you are embarrassed, because you are shy, because maybe you have some complexes based on your past experiences. If you can't make that connection with other people, that further is going to create some problems, because then other people will not be able to validate the authentic parts of you, right? So it kind of goes back again to this idea of authenticity and being honest with yourself. Because only then when you are honest with yourself, then you can be honest and authentic with other people. And then that's a win, because when you're honest with yourself and you accept yourself and you validate yourself, all the parts, different parts, and who you are as a person, that's 50%. And then if you're authentic, right, then other people can see you, can recognize you. And then you get the feedback from the environment of who you are as a person. And that's another 50%. And there you go, that's 100% of meeting your need for validation.